and then I'll do the intro, and hopefully Anna will be here. Is everybody ready?
Yeah.
Great. Ready. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. I'm just going to give folks a few minutes to get into the Zoom webinar room, and we're just waiting for Anna to come. She's just having a little bit of an issue getting logged in, so we'll just wait 60 seconds. There she is. Magic. Hi, Anna.
Hi. Hi,
Anna.
Hi, Sophia. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to meet you.
Hi, Anna.
Hi.
We're just giving people a minute to get into the Zoom room.
Okay, great.
And then I'll start. So welcome everyone to the Green Party Live. Every other Wednesday, we're gathering Green friends, members, and supporters for conversations with elected Greens, activists, authors, academics, business people, NGO leaders, and change makers of all kinds to explore how collaboration, integration, and participation in our democracy holds the key for delivering the urgent systems change required to create environmental, social, and economic justice for all. As Greens, we really value conversation, dialogue, and debate, even when it is sometimes difficult, because we know that the solutions to the problems of the day won't be discovered through rhetoric that is delivered in sound bites. So we believe that better is possible, but how do we make better happen? Better is possible when we build common ground, not battleground, when we turn activism in our streets into legislation in our parliament, when our economy serves our environment and our well-being, when the challenges that we face are solved by the communities who face them, and when our homes, health, and work are seen as green issues. Better is possible, let's build it together is our tagline. So tonight and over the coming months, we're going to be delving into three major themes. One is, of course, systems change, because we know that social and environmental justice are indivisible. And that's not a message that fits into a soundbite, as I said before, but we want to lead by not reinforcing siloed issues and trying to integrate the various threads that come together to create solutions by engaging people in conversations to reveal the truth about how solutions to our crises are interdependent. The second part is collaboration over competition. If everything is connected, then we've got to embrace our shared values and find ways to work together, even when it's not easy. And the final part is participatory democracy, because a flourishing democracy requires citizens to have access to robust and truthful information, to engage in debate during elections and beyond, to get out and vote and be empowered by national government with information, skills, legal framework, and resources required to create customized local solutions. So tonight's event is the second part of a two-part series where we are talking about one of the most pollutive industries in the world, top 10 pollutive industry, and how within this industry, social, environmental, and climate justice are indivisible. And we're joined today by changemakers who are going to share their stories and strategies for how to make better possible, because they're already making better happen. So join me in welcoming our guests tonight. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and we're going to share a few videos as we go. So Safia, if you want to start, we'll begin with you.
Oh, thank you, Holly. Fantastic introduction. So firstly, I'm sorry, I've just moved home, which means that my Wi-Fi isn't as stable. Glad to meet you. My name's Safia Mini. I'm a serial social entrepreneur. I founded People Tree 30 years ago in Tokyo. I went on to do advisory work, and then founded Real Sustainability, which is a website and information hub on 10 topics of sustainable living, from fashion, beauty, money, travel, energy, citizens' rights, well-being, etc., etc. And there's also a very strong leadership section. So please have a look at Real Sustainability. I think that might be something interesting too. So in terms of sustainable fashion, I think my journey was very much as probably first as a human rights activist. I was a member of Amnesty International, and then secondly as an ecologist, wanting to live and to use for that I really felt put nature central to everything it did. And I was in a position where I found a new home in Tokyo, and started to understand that there was very little fair trade. And so I put together the first supply chains, first in regenerative organic cotton, and then built it through from the farming communities that we worked with in Gujarat to social businesses, to manufacture to fair trade, the principles of fair trade clothing. We also used craft techniques, traditional techniques like hand weaving, hand knitting, hand embroidery, hand block print techniques, because that was a way of really generating the maximum value addition, creating livelihoods in rural areas for women. I just wanted to show very quickly a little video of that journey of building up sustainable supply chains, and then continue with my introduction, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. I'll share my screen. Just so you know, your Wi-Fi is slowing down a little bit, so if we're slow to response, it might be because of that.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. These things happen in our Zoom world. 1 second.
The concept of people choose to use fashion as a tool to change. When I started the company, we built up supply chains working with organic cotton farmers and fair trade groups. And there were two things that were central to choosing the right kinds of people to work with. One was that they put women's rights central to what they do, and the second was they really take seriously sustainability and the environment. We pioneered the standards in fair trade and organic cotton and fair trade manufactured clothing through our fair trade organisation, and that really helped us build a huge amount of dedication. I think as a creator, what's always inspired me have been the stories of people, the craftsmanship, and the possibility of using trade to empower people to lift them out of poverty and to do business completely differently. You know, when you go around the developing world, you just see the most awful worker exploitation. What I wanted to do was to capture what modern day slavery, the worst of the fashion industry is, and that's what I've tried to do in Slave to Fashion.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So I think we all know that we need to cut our production and our consumption of new fashion by as much as 70%. So the question then remains, you know, during this COVID period, not sent to them, or that are sitting in the factories, that the global south, the suppliers and producers, that even today, more than 50% of them don't earn minimum wage in Bangladesh, for example. So we know that we need to reorganize fashion so that whilst we're buying secondhand, and secondhand will be as large as the market for fast fashion in very, very few years, at the same time, we need to look at different ways of producing. And I do believe that will be through regenerative agriculture, through organic cotton, as it will also be looking at manufacturing techniques that are principally by hand, to make sure that the most of a large proportion of the FOB price, that's the price that we pay in the field for the product, goes to the farmer, the artisan and the maker. Up until now, it's probably been as little the basic human rights whilst protecting the environment and creating some resilience, as many of our global south communities start facing the impact of the climate collapse. So I do believe there's a different way of doing fashion. I think that we have a lot of resource, a lot of understanding available to us, but that shift is the place that we're sitting at the moment. I'm very excited to be joining and able to learn from others of you on the call today. Thank you.
And that kind of segues great into what Babs is doing here in the UK. Babs, do you want to share your introduction, and I can also share your video when you're ready?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Yeah, just also to say it's really nice to be part of this, and thanks for inviting me. It's really inspiring to see your work, Sophia, as well. So my work is with natural dyes, and I run a business called Botanical Inks, which is a natural dye business based in Bristol. And we offer non-toxic natural dyeing services for designers, brands, tuition and workshops for people who want to learn about how to natural dye for themselves, for creative projects or for bigger productions of their own. And I had my book published by Quadrille in 2018, which it really is a kind of catalogue showing you the whole process of natural dyeing, from sourcing sustainable natural fibres as locally as possible to how to scour them and prepare them for dyeing so they're colour fast using natural mordants which are non-toxic, and how to source colour in your region in the most sustainable way, and how to do different dyeing processes from piece dyeing, yarn dyeing, and yeah, all kinds of basic natural dyeing to more kind of complex surface application techniques like block prints, screen print, shibori, resist dyeing techniques. Also turning dyes into inks for painting and drawing, writing, and using plant-based starch print mediums so that you can also do different kinds of printing. And I work with paper and also textile fiber surfaces, so yarn-based and fabrics, and also garments. So my work's actually very much inspired by time that I spent in India working with incredible artisan block printers in Jaipur using Murghal block printing techniques, which are absolutely stunning. And very much my work is coming from a place of being an illustrator and a painter, and going into university to learn printmaking, and realizing how toxic the processes are and how mechanicalized, and really being very much inspired by what I saw in India of cottage industries working together with handmade processes, hand carving blocks, hand printing, mixing inks, and working with fibers, papers, and fabrics that are also grown and made within the region. So that's kind of what I'm bringing to my practice here in England. It's very much about a local soil to soil textile system, and looking at the fibres we have available to us here, which is clearly wool. We don't really have many other plant fibres, although there are many pilot projects working on that. Generally our plant fibres have to come from Europe at the closest. And yeah, and so my work has been using local fibres, always unbleached, undyed, applying natural organic plant colours to them, and creating garments and accessories within England, and specifically within my region, the southwest of England. So the Bristol Cloth is the project that I've been making for the last few years, which pieces together a localized production system within 15 miles of Bristol, mostly, but entirely within the UK. So it's a pioneering system. We don't really have local provenances like this for many other productions. And not just the provenance, but also that it's a non-toxic system, and we pay everyone the true value of their craft. So Bristol Cloth is sourcing regeneratively farmed fibre from Fernhill Farm, which is just outside of Bristol. I hand dye it with organic plant dyes, and then it's woven in the Bristol Weaving Mill, which is a small artisan mill run by women that was set up in 2015. It's the first mill to open in Bristol in 100 years. And I know everyone in this production process. I love them all, they're my friends. I pay them exactly what they want to be paid. Jen gets paid more for her wool than probably anyone else in the UK because it's worth it. And it means that she gets to do what she wants to do. She gets to be a farmer or a shepherd even. And so for me, it's a really beautiful textile production system. And this is how I would see all fashion and textile production systems around the world, based on localized bioregional systems with heart. And so I have a little video which you have, and you're welcome to play it now.
The British landscape and economy have been shaped by the textiles industry. Local textile production was integral to our farming systems and our livelihoods. Today, traditional British textiles are threatened nearly to extinction, and the fabrics we use and wear are part of a damaging global production system. What's missing from the UK is a locally sourced and manufactured cloth for designers to work with. We are setting out to change this by creating the Bristol Cloth, a sustainable bioregional material that regenerates rather than degrades our land and natural resources.
I'm Jen Hunter at Fernhill Farm, and we are the fibre providers for the Bristol Cloth project.
I'm Babs Bean from Botanical Inks, and I do the natural dyeing for the Bristol Cloth project.
I'm Juliet from the Bristol Weaving Mill, and we are the manufacturers and technical advisors involved in the Bristol Cloth project.
We've always considered ourselves holistic, and all our decisions link back to the social aspects and the environmental impact. We need to regenerate our soils. The idea is that you mimic natural grazing herd habitats, which means they're always moving on to fresh pasture. There's a lot of nutrients going back into the soil, and plants that are growing on regenerative soils are actually sequestering the carbon. With blade shearing, you can leave an inch of wool fibre all over the sheep's body so that she's insulated from the sun and from the rain. All round, our system seems to be a high welfare system. It's chemical free, it's completely transparent, and there is a very low footprint on the world.
We use local organic plant dye materials and natural fibres as part of a non-toxic creative practice. We chose madder and weld to dye the Bristol Cloth yarn. Madder is a root and weld is a yellow flowering plant, and that gives a beautiful burnt rusty orange. We do the dyeing process without using any toxic synthetic materials at all. It's not only not polluting, it's biopositive, it's creating things which then become food and nourishment for other life forms.
It's about 90 years since the last textile factory in Bristol closed, and since then there's not really been any manufacturing in the city, so we're really excited to bring it back. And the textile industry as a whole in the UK is going through quite an exciting time where we're seeing a resurgence of artisan fabrics, and people are really valuing those traditional methods. I think a lot of people agree that the industry as it is not sustainable, and it's so important that we start putting these robust systems in place. The involvement of all the people along the way has created this really unique fabric that is truly a Bristol cloth.
We need your support to help recreate the local production of textiles and to create a regenerative cloth. You'll be supporting carbon sequestering agriculture, non-toxic natural dye processes, and small-scale weaving, bringing bioregional artisan cloth production back to our shores. It feels like the Bristol Cloth is a really beautiful example of what's possible when people come together, sharing their passions to create something that's bigger than themselves.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Anna, last but not least, do you want to introduce yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, sure. Just to say that I really want some Bristol Cloth. I've wanted some for ages, and I keep, like, when you look at a video like that and see that gorgeous like story process where people can actually engage in where our stuff comes from, you know, that just makes me want to weep. It's yeah, it's incredible. Anyway, so I've come from Labour Behind the Label. I've worked at Labour Behind the Label about 10 years or so. It's what it is we're a small NGO campaigning charity, and we try to work to transition the the big scale fashion industry and lobby brands to improve human rights and working conditions for the people who are making clothes that are going to the high street. So what we're not about is about small ethical brands necessarily, although all that stuff is great. We're looking at kind of systems change for the big brands and the mass industry that is currently existing, and how do we get those processes and the shops on the high street to be to transition to a way that respects people and respects the planet. So Labour Behind the Label is a member of something called the Clean Clothes Campaign, which is a global network of unions and workers' rights activists and human rights defenders in garment producing countries, which also includes the UK, who are trying to kind of stand up for change. And so we're part of a global movement to be developing solutions that are coming from workers or from producers or from people who are involved in the industry and the effects on them. Yeah. So we do kind of a number of things. I guess one of the main things that Labour Behind the Label does is casework. So we stand in solidarity with groups of workers in specific factories when there's been a violation of their human rights. So, for example, at the moment, I'm working on a case in Thailand, which involves some migrant workers from Myanmar who were being paid half the minimum wage, and then they got fired because they spoke out to a newspaper, and then through that, so we've taken up the case because it was a Tesco supplier, but it's also supplying Disney and NBC Universal and Starbucks, and we're lobbying those brands because we're lobbying Tesco because Tesco is a UK brand, and so I've been in conversation with them about how the severance that is owed to those workers needs to be paid to them. So we do these kind of sort of granular casework stuff, but also we do big picture thinking of how do we get a living wage for all the workers who are making our clothes, and how do we ensure greater transparency in supply chains so that we actually know where our stuff is coming from. So we kind of do a bit of both. Then I think I might just share a little bit about maybe my route to coming to this and where I've come from with my journey in the fashion industry, I guess.
Also a former Green councillor as well. So
maybe. Yeah, so I mean, I am an active member of the Green Party and have been for a while. And I was an elected Green councillor in Bristol in Easton for just for 1 year in 2015. And yeah, I think it's when I look at this issue, which is constantly fascinating to me, I see that the green thinking on how the economic problems and the environmental problems and the social problems all need to be solved together as part of a holistic understanding of how do we change the industry, and that's really at the root of my values when I think about how I think of change, and why I don't see any of the other parties kind of speaking to that. And so that's why I really think that green thinking could be really important for this industry. I kind of came to doing work about the fashion industry from I did just from traveling and being I was doing some research for a student network called Speak in India in like 2008, 2009, and we went to visit an IKEA factory. I went with a producer who was selling a kind of small lace product that they'd got a group of Dalit women who were doing some hand crocheting work, and they were selling to this IKEA factory this very handmade beautiful product, and IKEA the factory was putting it on a cushion cover and selling it to IKEA. But what had happened was that so I went into this buyers meeting, and the guy said, the buyers IKEA said that they can get it made somewhere else for half the price. So I'm going to offer as the factory to cut my piece price by half, and you have to do the same. And the guy said, the person who was my friend who was doing this lace product said, oh, this is ridiculous, we can't then pay people, we'll lose all of our profit, and it'll mean that we're not actually paying people enough for their piece so that they receive like value and a minimum wage for their work. And they said, oh no, okay, well, but we should do it anyway because we want to keep IKEA on board. And that was my first like introduction to sort of what really happens in buying chains, as the power that is held at the top by big companies like IKEA, like Tesco, like Marks and Spencer's, like Primark, that they can make a decision and then everybody else down the chain has to jump in line, and I thought, this is not right. And we have to somehow work out how do we redistribute value and power in the way that we do global supply. And it's a big economic problem. But yeah, that was my first introduction to fashion. And then when I came back to Bristol, I looked up Labour Behind the Label, and I ended up working for them after some time. So yeah, I've been plugging away at this for a while, but
well, and all three of you are working towards making the fashion industry something that's circular rather than something that's hierarchical. Thank you, Anna. So I'm going to ask the first questions that we have for everyone here, but just so everyone knows who's watching, if you want to ask any questions, please just put them in the Q&A box, and they'll be there for upvoting. And then when we get to the end of the questions we've planned, we'll start to ask your questions to the panelists. So my first question is for Sophia. We Greens aim to transition our economy into one that promotes a dignified life for everyone and regeneration of the environment, which all three of you have mentioned. What does that mean to you in the relationship with the work that you do and the issues in the fashion industry?
Well, quite simply, it means fairer trade. The trading system is totally toxic. It's riddled with systemic racism. Anna discussed, Anna from Labour Behind the Label, who I've worked with very, very closely for 20 years or so, talks about the intolerable exploitation of workers and the power which buyers have over suppliers. And there is this race to the bottom, where one country will have opportunity to have a trade union to represent them, also or an effective workers committee, and we also need a fair or a living wage, which is unfortunately 1% of workers or less are earning a living wage, or a fair or living wage. So what we need to do is we really need to look at the dysfunction of the current economic system, and how we put a living wage and the well-being of people and the planet central to the trading system. So there are lots of different initiatives that are moving in this direction. When we talk about the just transition, when we talk about the Green New Deal, let's see what happens with the American election. It would be great to start making progress rather than going backwards. We have the finance community looking at something called the ESGs, the environment, social and governance issues. So this would tool pension asset banks, analysts, people that are basically talking to fashion companies to talk about what they're doing to transition to net zero, not by 2050, but by 2030 or 2035, not later. But also they would be asking some really hard-hitting questions about supply chain, about their modern slavery report. So any business with a £36 million turnover or more is required by law to publish a modern slavery report. But they get around that by putting something on their websites that says that they are looking into it without going into any detail at all about what they're doing. The system living on, we can use our leverage to push for change, but I do, it needs to be regulated change. We can't just wait progressive businesses to do the right thing.
Yeah, agreed. And I think this kind of segues into what we were going to ask you, Babs, as the next question. You know, for centuries, government subsidies, which sort of uphold this economic system that we're living in now, have forced farmers in the UK to farm in ways which don't protect the soil and don't protect human health or wildlife health or the wellness and resilience of the communities who are either farming or the artisans or even the consumers themselves. And one of the things the Green Party tries to do is create an economic system that allows for everyone to have economic stability and secure dignified work. How does your work help sort of reverse this and the work of sort of fibre sheds across the UK and the world? You're muted. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question and really important. And if I just kind of focus on Bristol Cloth in particular to answer. So yeah, I mean, land these days, farming land has to be in like a condition that it's suitable for farming purposes. And so that tends to mean that it's going into a state where it's not really sequestering much carbon and the soil has been depleted. There's a lot to say about it, but what we do with the Bristol Cloth and the regenerative farming techniques is that we are managing the land in a way which you would see with natural grazing herds. We have a lot of animals putting nutrients back into the ground, working the soil with their hooves, aerating it, putting oxygen in, so you're getting minerals and air going into the soil and replenishing it. So it's actually rebuilding the soil, and it's left that the flock will be moved on every day to fresh pasture, which is really healthy for them, and really mimicking a way that a normal herd would move. And it means that the area of land that has been just lived on by the animals is then left for a very long period of time before the animals come back around to it. So within that time, the soil is regenerating, it's growing plants, they grow very tall, which means they also have very deep roots. And a plant with a tall spore and deep roots is able to sequester a maximum amount of carbon from the air back into the soil where it belongs. So it's reversing effects of climate change. And not only that, the soil is being nutrified, so it means that it actually has plenty more harvests, potential for plenty more harvests in the soil, and all life on Earth is dependent on that. So it's really important. And so we're really promoting regenerative farming techniques with the Bristol Cloth. The way that we grow food and the way we grow fibre, and also this applies to energy systems, that it's done in a regenerative way where it's improving the landscape and improving our chances of continuing to live in a healthy way on this planet. So what's really important about this as well is that we're paying, like I said before, we're paying the farmer a decent amount of money, which reflects the value of the work that they're doing. They're really skilled at what they do. It's a hell of a lot of work, and they have huge overheads to do this. So they charge us a set amount per kg of fibre, which is perhaps 3 times more than other farmers might be used to getting. And it's really important to us that we honour their work by paying this amount, which truly it is what they need to be able to keep doing what they do. And what's also very intelligent about their farming techniques, not only being regenerative and offering a decent amount for the fibre, they have a 2 income channel from their sheep. So they've created, it's called a Mendip type. It's a cross between a Romney and a Shetland and a Romney lamb. So Shetland, obviously, if you know about wool, is a very fine quality of wool. It's one of the best in the UK. It's very strong and soft. And the Romney is also, it's great for its meat. So they have crossbred them to create this type of sheep, which gives a really great quality of organic meat and also incredibly good quality wool. So it's really important to farmers that they do diversify their income revenues, because they're having a tough time, let's face it. And Fernhill Farm, they're not only doing that, they're also running events, they've got glamping, they do weddings, they have so many different things going on, they have educational outlets, it's, you know, and so it's, yeah, it's, we're trying to really value what they're doing and support them so that they can continue to do it. I think that answers most of the things in your question.
Yeah, that's great. And I think too, it's one of those things that, like your video showed, it enhances the community in totality by creating environments that people can work in and that other beings can thrive in, whilst working alongside the food production system, a regenerative food production system, and also creating fashion out of the products that would otherwise go to waste.
Also just add that, I mean, the sheep are very happy in the way that they are roaming free in the Mendip Hills. It's an area of outstanding natural beauty. They have a lot of fresh pasture, and you see it in the quality of the wool, because when an animal's stressed, they have a stunt in the growth of their fleece. And when you look at the staple of the wool, you like pull out the wool and look at it, you can see there's a very few points where the wool has kind of stunted and then grown again, much like if you're looking at the rings of a tree when you chop it in half, you can see where it's been the winter and then when it's been the summer and started growing again. And so the fact that this is a very soft and strong and very good quality wool, it shows you that these animals have a minimal stress environment that they're living in. And the fact that we're using hand blade shearing as well, which is a much less stressful experience for them than the electric, what am I trying to say?
Shearing.
The, what do you call it?
Like the electric shears? I don't know.
Yeah, like electric shaver, basically. It's a really stressful environment for them to be in. And when it's done with the electric shavers, they basically leave a very small amount of wool on the skin of the animal. So they have to then be kept indoors for the rest of the year because it's too cold to be outside. And then they have to have their lambs indoors, which is very stressful. But with hand blade shearing, they're leaving an inch or two of the fleece on the animal so it can continue to be outdoors for much longer throughout the year and throughout the lambing season, which is much less stressful for them. And, you know, having access to natural diverse plants growing on the land because there's no chemicals being used. They get all kinds of different plants, not just one or two types of grass. They have a very nutritious diet. And, you know, there's so much to say about it. It's a really good system.
When we, Julie will share in the chat in a little bit, everyone who's watching, but regenerative farming or agroecology is part of Green Party policy. So we've done a few events specifically on regenerative agriculture. If you want to learn more about what Babs is talking about in holistic plant grazing, that helps draw carbon down and even has created climate beneficial wool in the States anyways. Thanks, Babs. Anna, the next question is for you. Is there a story from your years of working with Labor Behind the Label that, or as part of the Clean Clothes campaign, that inspires you and keeps you going in relation to reworking the fashion industry, or even as a former Green Party councillor, or one where you've seen that the social and environmental issues have been addressed for people and for place?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest wins that we've ever had, really, for change in the garment industry was out of a terrible disaster. So people may have heard of the Rana Plaza factory collapse. There was in 2013 a building in Bangladesh that was built on a swampland that had 5 or 6 different garment factories in it, and the building collapsed. Developed a crack in the side of the building the day before, and all the workers were told that they still had to come back in the building because they had orders to get done. Got to get them out, and then the building collapsed, and 1,134 people were buried in the rubble and died, and then thousands more people were injured. It was like a really huge industrial disaster. And it was a kind of wake-up call for the fashion industry in lots of ways. You know, and members of the Clean Clothes campaign like dug in the rubble and found the labels from loads and loads of different global brands, and then basically we fought for the next 3 or 4 years to hold those brands to account, and you know, in the weeks that followed, there was a really big media storm about it, and lots of the brands came out with statements of commiseration for the families and solidarity with the communities, but actually when it came down to it, there were millions of dollars owed in compensation to the families of the victims, and it took us 3 years of hard campaigning, of lobbying the brands, of saying, look, we can't just forget this, you can't just let justice go unserved, and in the end, all of the families of the victims did receive the compensation that they were owed, but it was through like a global effort of thousands of people signing petitions, of constant lobbying, of working alongside the ILO, of working alongside different governments to try and call to account the brands, and like really trying to look at how do we solve something on a you know, that on a global level, like how do we all come together to try and make sure that compensation goes to these workers. But the other amazing thing that did come out of the Rana Plaza disaster was that there was an initiative to try and fix factories in Bangladesh. So how can we make sure that this, you know, that factories which are quite often health and safety disasters, you know, that Rana Plaza doesn't ever happen again. And so there was an initiative that the Clean Clothes campaign had been pushing alongside union partners for quite a long time, that was about eventually called the Accord, which was looking at how do we get independent factory inspections, so that it's not just a guy who's paid by the brand to go in with a clipboard and tick everything off, but independent auditors who have like engineering backgrounds to go into the factories and say, is this factory safe? You know, oh, actually there's bars on the window, oh dear, there's that fire escape is locked with a big key, oh actually that you know, that this building is structurally unsound because you put an extra 4 floors on top of it, and actually it's not fit for purpose because of the heavy machinery that's in there. And so there was an initiative that came together, which again was hard won by a number of years of campaigning and making sure that people didn't forget what had happened. That was a global supply chain initiative that was signed in a legally binding way by companies and by workers. So it was like 50-50 worker representatives and brand representatives, to say that they would do a collaborative initiative to fix the factories. So, and it funded by the brands as an annual fee that they would have to pay into this initiative. And then there was an independent inspection, and then sustainable action plans, transparent actions that had to be taken for all of the suppliers were published in, and the information was put out there, and then people were able to hold each of those factories and each of those brands to account for making sure that the factories were safe. And so it was kind of incredible that out of the ashes of something that was really terrible, there was born something that was quite like revolutionary, in that it looked at a global issue and then got the brands to sign something that was legally binding, which meant that they had to take action and put their hands in their pocket and pay for something to make sure that the disaster didn't ever happen again. So I think that's probably one of the things that I've been most proud of being part of, trying to make sure that happened, and then seeing change in the industry. And actually I would say that I think factories in Bangladesh are safer now. I don't think they're fair. I don't think, like, you know, workers are being paid a living wage, but they're not, and they're still having their unions busted. And actually there's a whole new different type of crisis now that's happened because of COVID. But in terms of whether the factories are going to fall down, I think that's not the case anymore. So
one small step, and I guess it gives us hope for other sort of issues like the climate breakdown and stuff like that. Maybe one day we can get ecocide law passed or something like that kind of ticks all the boxes in one fell swoop. Safia, the next question we had was for you. There are often tensions with solution building because of competing priorities. You've been investing your time and energy into shifting the shape and functionality of the fashion industry for over a decade. People are still suffering, as Anna was just saying, and we need urgent action. And things like Fashion Revolution and your books have helped, and even the documentaries that you have been a part of have helped people start to understand the issues. But how do we sort of reconcile the issue between urgent action and mindset change, which takes a little longer?
Good question. Well, I think that the True Cost movie, when it was seen by more than 10 million people, really did help to shape fashion mindset shifts. So it was seen by a huge number of luxury and mid-market and fast fashion brands, you know, from the senior management to the design teams, and that in terms of the fashion industry is. There are some very significant initiatives happening. I think when I was out in the streets with the Extinction Rebellion in April last year, we for September, for London Fashion Week, we ran a boycott of London Fashion Week. We had the Stockholm Fashion Week cancelled. We saw a large number of different luxury brands calling a halt to the kinds of shows that they were running. Vogue ran with illustrated covers to try to draw attention to the huge amount of carbon and waste involved in fashion photography, for example. So there has been a shift. I think that the shift will in certainly the area around fast fashion and actually human rights within luxury brands. We'd all expect that, you know, if we're spending relatively high ticket money on luxury brands, that they're paying their workers well. Well, that really isn't the case. They're often being produced on the very same production lines as a fast fashion brand. And I know from personal experience that in a lot of embellishment work that's done in India and Vietnam and Cambodia and Pakistan is not paid anything close to a minimum wage, let alone a living wage. But on the fast fashion, in terms of mindset shift, I think by default, Depop, eBay, where young people are thinking, well, you know, actually don't really want to waste something, or I want to my generation and now in COVID times it's more difficult. Not that I love charity shops, that's why I spend most of my time. But you know, they're buying online, they're buying secondhand. Other brands are shifting to secondhand, to being part of their product offer. And there are also some really interesting rental models that are coming up, which I'm very pleased to see. So this shift towards secondhand being very mainstream, being cool, hip, certainly. You know, when we were young, it was cool to dress in secondhand and to look original rather than to wear, you know, the color of the season, as it were. So I think there's a bit of a shift back towards that, or forwards into that, as the reality of climate collapse, ecological collapse, and the social cost of yeah, so I do feel that mindset shift is happening really, really quickly. You know, it would have been great had it have been 25 years ago. We wouldn't be looking at heading towards 2 degrees above pre-industrialized levels. So, you know, it's such a shame that it's taken this to really get a shift.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to skip the next section of questions for those of you that are on the panel, but I think what you've just said, Safia, has really linked into this next question about the fact that government also has we always put sort of the onus on people who are buying things to make the changes that need to happen. But at the end of the day, it's the sort of governments and international relationships that create this issue. And we're having a debate in Parliament today about the agricultural bill and foreign trade with food. What do you think a party like the Green Party of England and Wales could do to help change the shape of the fashion industry? And this is open to all three of you to answer. So go ahead and unmute yourself if you've got an answer.
Well, I certainly feel that in the way that Obama would have pushed it through, but unfortunately wasn't able to, a proper transparent system to prove that fashion that's imported is free of slavery, free of slave-made product, would be a very, very significant way to build transparency around human rights. And a consequence of that would also be an understanding of the procurement of the product, because we would then know where different fibers or different accessories were being produced. So we would have a much sounder. That I think to work with, and the enforcement of the Modern Slavery Act with a good NGO watchdog would allow the kind of work that Labour Behind the Label or the Clean Clothes campaign, on a really large scale. So we need investigative journalism, but clearly, unless we have that watchdog that pull apart modern slavery reports and truly question organisations when the modern slavery reports really say very little. And the same will be the case, of course, when we start developing the science-based targets. There is an apparel and footwear standard, but currently there isn't the rigour to be able to hold fashion companies, even if they do have a statement, to transitioning to net zero carbon by 2030 or 2035 or 40. To truly evaluate those reports and then put pressure on the senior management, which will, that will help the investor community, but it will also help the customers and employees. That the whole stakeholder pot will really then be supported by something that needs to be done with a lot of care.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Anna, you unmuted yourself. Do you want to speak on this as well?
Yeah, just very briefly, what the Green Party needs to do is get more people elected so that when we've got more people in power, they can be pushing these policies. What I want government to do, which is a different question from what the Green Party can do right now, but it is, to support mandatory human rights due diligence, so that companies are held legally accountable for things that happen within their supply chain, which is the Modern Slavery Act, but more. It's companies evaluating what are the risks to human rights and to the planet through their operations, and then publishing action plans for how they mitigate the risk and what they're going to what actions they're going to take to make sure that those impacts are not felt for workers and for the planet. So it's it's something that the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights say that all governments need to put into law and look at, and it is coming to in UK Parliament that we are going to be looking at what would that look like in the UK, but at the moment, it's really the things that anybody's discussing is quite weak. And again, it's just about this kind of voluntary reporting mechanism, and I think we need government to be enforcing like duties on companies that hold them legally accountable for their actions, but also have mandatory reporting, which means that and accountability, which can actually be useful for people who are victims within supply chains to be able to say actually that something happened and you haven't done the thing that you should have done. So there is a mechanism that I can go to, which will mean that I can find justice. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Can I just make another point, which is that we need to understand power in this. And we need to understand that at the moment, those holding power tend to be of a very, very narrow subset. Table, so that we have, you know, senior board members, trustees, senior management with true representation. At the moment, we have, you know, a huge underrepresented, one could call it BAME community. Some people don't like that word, people of colour, who are simply not able to look through the lens of power and the systemic racism. I know that you very kindly posted the webinar that we're running tomorrow with key panelists from academia and also from fashion and from construction. But again, I would urge you, if anybody wants to really think about how to really create a place, making a racket, sorry. So please do.
You just got cut off the last sentence there, Seth. Do you want to say it again?
Sorry. So okay. If you're interested in looking at power and how we move forward with a plan that's truly owned by in a much more democratic way, in the same way that we had the Citizens' Assembly, but no legal piece to then adopt it, please do join the webinar that we're running tomorrow at 12:30, which is about diversity and strength in the workplace, and looking at those how we create action plans to truly address this question of power and inequality.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Babs, did you want to jump in as well before we go to the audience questions?
Yeah, sure. I would love to add that in terms of moving away from degenerative to regenerative fashion systems, I would love to see more encouragement for farmers to transition to regenerative farming techniques in the form of educational resources, assistance, and financial support from the government. I think there could be packages that really help farmers to you know, initially to have the incentive to even want to make that transition, because there is no incentive at the moment. Except for, you know, a small handful of farmers who are passionate and want to make that leap, but it's very risky. So for there to be that kind of support, I think would make a big difference. I would also add that you know, we could really spend a lot more looking at our fiber systems so that we're not reliant on international imports for fiber and dyes. You know, it's only perhaps in the last 100 years that we have become reliant on textile production systems in other continents. We always used to produce our own linen and hemp and even cotton. And we can. This land is set up for doing that. There's no reason why we shouldn't be, except for ridiculous, you know, restrictions around things like growing hemp, which make no sense. You know, these kinds of restrictions just need to be removed because they're really unhelpful. We have so much potential to be growing natural, non-toxic fibers, which don't need chemicals to grow because they are naturally resilient to pests and fungal infections and all kinds of things, plants that are really suitable to this land. And also dye plants. You know, we're very much reliant on imports of fibers and dyes, but also very much on petroleum plastic based fibers. Most of the clothes that we're wearing now are actually made of plastic, and it's not biodegradable, and it's not healthy for us to be wearing these toxic materials which are offsetting into our skin, into our environment. And we all know about microplastics and microfibers, and thousands of these particles coming out with a single laundry wash and going into our water systems, our rivers and oceans, and our drinking water, and the food that we're eating. It's, you know, our soils and all of our foods are completely contaminated because of our obsession with plastic clothing and our obsession with dyes, which are also petroleum byproduct industry derived. So it's very interesting when you look at how actually most of the fashion industry is based on byproducts from petroleum industry, and what a polluting industry that is in itself, and what a shame that we've become so reliant on this. And what would it take to transition to plant-based systems instead, like we always used to? So I'd really like to see support from government to put restrictions onto the use of petroleum byproducts in terms of fibers and dyes in the fashion industry, because they're highly toxic. They are detrimental to the health of the people processing them, in environments that have been contaminated by them, and even people wearing those clothing. And then you have to think about the landfill it goes into, and the quantity, the extraordinary quantity that's going into landfill every day, that's being thrown away. It may be worn a few times, 3 times, and then thrown away, and it can't decompose. And it's, you know, there's so much to say about it. And there needs to be, I think, awareness of people, because most people don't know about this stuff. They are innocent consumers. They just don't realize what they're investing in by buying a polyester dress, you know, that's been dyed and printed with petrochemical dyes. And if there was that awareness, you know, I truly believe that people are inherently good and they want to make good decisions and have a beneficial impact on the environment and the people around them and the people not around them. And if people can just know what is actually going on here with these fashion systems, they will be able to make better choices. And if the government can actually put restrictions on the use of toxic materials and give funding to the research and development of positive and biological materials locally based, then that would make a huge difference.
Absolutely. We had another guest who runs Repowering London and Energy Gardens, and he was talking about how they created this metric to measure the social return on investment for the projects that they hold. And we also had Deborah Barker from the UK Fibre Shed, or Southeast England Fibre Shed, talking about a project called, I think it's 1,000 gardens or 100 gardens, where everyone would, you know, do their part, whether it's a window pot or, you know, your whole backyard, to grow your own plant dyes and contribute to the plant dye economy, which is actually quite, plant dyes are quite expensive, especially grown regeneratively. So those two types of projects sort of mixed together, you know, help give government the framework, even the government we have now, to create, you know, an economy or work within the economy that they have that is broken, but creating some benefits for small communities. I'm going to move on to the questions, as we're running a little bit behind. The first one is from Mike Dixon. He says, how do we encourage people to buy eco clothing rather than cheap items from large high street stores? And Mike is from Brighton. Does anybody want to take that one? Sophia, maybe?
Safia. Yeah, so I think it's about buying less and buying higher quality. So, you know, if we're buying more secondhand, then when we do buy new, then being sure that we're buying to the highest possible ethical standards, ideally fair trade. I absolutely agree. We shouldn't be buying synthetics at all. We should be buying plant-based or yes, your lovely wool, but certainly we shouldn't be buying synthetics. And there are some brilliant initiatives now also for secondhand use of toddler wear, children's wear, school wear, so that people are not having to spend so much money buying new product. New isn't available. I think there are lots of rental options that are available too, rental or secondhand options.
Thanks, Safia. Anna, did you want to add?
Yeah, I think my approach to this question is always I think we need to think about, where does the shift come from? And I do think that the role of the consumer is important, but I also don't think that it helps sometimes for us to all feel the weight of, oh gosh, everything that I buy is is the potential way of changing the system, because actually I think probably getting the kind of mass boycott or mass movement that would of consumers to not buy from Primark or to signal that change was necessary probably won't happen to the level that would be needed to impact someone's profit, like a brand's profit, to the extent that it would change. And I actually think that our power within the system is not necessarily as mainly as consumption units, because that's what capitalism wants us to be. They want us to be that our power is only as people who buy. And actually I think our power is as people who act, and our power is as people who are citizens, and our power is as lobbyists and and information spreaders. And I think that there's a better question in the chat, which is, what steps can the average person do to put pressure on those in power to take sustainable and ethical fashion more seriously? And I think it's about how do we use our voices to be united in calling for change. And people should buy from ethical brands, and go for it if you can, if you want to. But I think I spent a long time having quandaries in the middle of shopping centres and standing there feeling depressed and anxious and taking the mental weight of the problems in the industry on myself, and actually came around to the idea that my wardrobe is not the thing that changes the world, but my activism is. And I want people to take that away as a message, that actually we can do more to be loud than to be people with money.
Yeah. And I think that documentary that Safia was a part of, that I think was made in 2016 or something like that, but it's literally called The True Cost. So the true cost of fast fashion is not reflected in the clothes themselves, whereas the true cost of what Babs creates is reflected in the price of the garments she produces. So that's one of the other issues, I guess, and why it doesn't fall on citizens. Babs, there's a couple questions here around the sheep, mainly. So Holly Fuller asks, I have looked at Bristol Cloth and support the approach completely. However, as a vegan, I don't know how to approach the issue of wool in this context. Can you tell me about how shearing the sheep affects them? And Peter Smith has also asked, what happens to the sheep? Are they slaughtered or culled at any point? Which I think you answered earlier, but.
Yeah, I think I've already spoke to the shearing process. I can talk through that again if you like.
No, just go with the, if you want to answer the vegan question.
I don't think any animal product is ever going to be able to be called vegan. So wool and leather and I don't know, alpaca and cashmere, these things are not suitable for vegans. However, if you rephrase the terminology and you look at animal friendly instead, then absolutely, Bristol Cloth uses very animal friendly farming processes with the highest standards of animal welfare possible. And I'm sure there's many other small artisan farms who also have a similar practice where they actually genuinely care about the welfare of the animals, and they have a personal, immediate relationship with them, and are very much looking after them as stewards, of the animals and of the land. And the new cashmere system I'm working with Leslie Pryor at Beaumont, she's very passionate about her connection with the animals and their welfare, and she speaks of the land and the animals being kept in good hearts. And I mean, there's a lot I could go into about these things, but I think it's interesting to take the term veganism out in this context and look at animal friendly. And when you're looking at, very large scale farming industries, like thousands of cashmere goats or merino sheep in Australia, or you look at kind of battery farming of chickens for food, like these kind of things. Clearly there's no respect or care for the animals in these processes, and absolutely move away from supporting those forms of farming. And I think it's difficult because you can only really know how the animals are being treated if you go to the farm and you have a relationship with the farmer and you see the animals and how they are and how they interact with people. You know, are they scared of people, or are they happy and relaxed and friendly and interactive? And so, you know, personally, I have been to the farms and I have these relationships with them for the fibers that I work with, but I couldn't say that that's true for most other producers. So.
And I guess there's also the question of the impact of, as you and Anna were talking about, the petrochemical industry that's involved in the fashion industry, much of which is going into vegan products, has a huge impact on the earth and the animals who dwell there because of the system, whether it's the dyes or the production of the product itself. So there is very few sort of completely pure, 100% harm-free in any definition of the word. As one of our previous guests was talking about, it's also going back to the waste that Safia was sharing, and dealing with that waste in a way, whether it's waste through using the byproducts of the food system that includes animals, or using recycling fabrics into new fabrics through upcycling. Safia, did you want to add something to that? I saw you unmuted. She's frozen, but looking very.
I do.
Chris, go ahead.
No, sorry, I don't think I do. No, I do. Okay, so we used to work with the alpaqueros in Peru, and they would work with alpaca hair, and that would be fallen hair, and they wouldn't kill them. But you know, I don't know. I mean, I think we have to. You know, I totally agree that, you know, we should choose whether we want to be vegan or whether we want to take a responsible, animal friendly approach to our fibers, or and I think that's, you know, I have never worked with in people tree with a leather product because I didn't trust the supply chain behind it. I think we for wool. I mean, wool is literally, you know, nothing. You know, we eat so much sheep, and then we just, you know, it's a valueless product. And I would love to see that that sheep's wool used in a sensible way. You know, I would also love to see far less sheep farmed. You know, the kind of George Monbiot way of really reclaiming land so that we can regenerate and rewild land. So I think there's a whole kind of shift on a much bigger scale that we're looking at. I think, you know, this area around. I mean, I'm a great believer and have great fondness for European textile craft skill. I have a Harris tweed coat that I love dearly, and it would be great to see all of that coming back. But let's also not forget that. You know, we are talking about farmers of cotton in Asia, in West Africa, whose carbon footprint is I'm sure less than, you know, half a ton, if that, of CO2 per year to our 10 or 11 tons per year on average here. You know, so what we're doing is we're saying, can we create organic cotton in a regenerative way where we are rotating the crops between rotating the organic cotton crop around green gram, growing bananas, often growing vegetables for their own local consumption between the organic cotton plants. You know, are we able to support a system that pays people decently, that looks after the soils and creates some form of true climate resilience? Because my God, you know, the catastrophe that's about to be worldwide. So I do agree it's important that we look at great examples that are small scale, and I'm not, you know, belittling in any way, but we also need, you know, a global shift in the fashion industry, and one that will put vulnerable farmers and artisans and workers really central to the debate whilst supporting our heritage skills here in Europe.
Thank you for that. And that's a very good sort of example of what Green Party policy tries to do as well, because it's bottom up and top down approach at the same time that creates the most meaningful change. So that's great. We're running out of time, so I'm gonna stop asking questions. Thank you everyone who put questions in the chat, and to our panelists who have so have answered the questions with such wisdom and experience. I appreciate it. If you missed part 1 of this series, Julie's going to share a link in the chat that will bring you to the Green Living Room, which is where we're going to post the part 2 that you've just experienced if you want to share it with friends and family. Our next event is going to be with Caroline Lucas, Lord Bird, and Jane Davidson to discuss the Future Generations Bill, which is going to be heading back into Parliament at the end of the month. The date and time might change because of the work that those 3 people do. So for now, it will be the week of the 18th at lunchtime, but that might change. Safia also has an event tomorrow. If you'd like to attend, Julie's going to reshare that link in the chat now. And the Young Greens have an event on Friday, which she'll also share a link to. So thank you everyone for coming tonight. Thank you to our panelists for sharing all the work that you do and for the work that you do and have done for years. And we'll see you all very soon. Bye.